Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. Welcome back to the show, Spencer.
Good to be here.
Spencer, an Angus Reid poll had some disturbing numbers for the Prime Minister. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, the poll, for the first time in the Angus Reid poll, it shows Justin Trudeau's approval rating, or his disapproval rating is now over 50%. It's 56 disapprove, 40% approve. And if you look at the chart of in the last year or so of his numbers, you can see a very clear trend. Approval going down consistently, disapproval going up consistently. It also showed that he's behind Scheer on issues like handling the economy. The amount of people who want a change in government is far outpacing the number of people who think the government should remain the same. So some very not good numbers for Justin.
What's behind the change in attitude? Justin was the darling of the nation just 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's that people are starting to see past the image he's created. He promised, a new, open, and accountable government. That hasn't happened at all. His trip to India was a disaster. He looked like a fool. He's been caught breaking tons of promises. Concern about the budget deficit in the same poll is going up. I think people expected that he would keep to his promise of 3 small budget deficits. Now he's obviously blowing way past that. So I think it's an accumulation of things, and I think the India trip has crystallized in a lot of people's minds that this guy's carefully crafted images really are fraud.
Does all of it, or some of it, also go to the budget, where there seemed to be very little in it to help his mission to make the middle class more affordable, more livable?
Yeah, I think there's so much virtue signaling and talk about things that really aren't meant for a budget, and I think people, especially with the concern over trade, the difficult economic environment, more competitive pressure from the states, I think people were expecting something that responded to those concerns, and instead they got a bunch of feel-good talk.
Do you think he's relied on his good looks for too long?
Yeah, I think just the image. I think the idea he had, and I think his advisors and top people there have, was that he could he'd be the face of everything, and then behind the scenes, the same people would be in charge. The same old. Lack of accountability, lack of transparency, lack of listening to people. And I think they felt they could just get away with distracting people with Trudeau all the time, and it's just not working anymore. I think that's why the India trip was such a big deal, because the one thing he had going for him in the minds of some people was that he was seemingly well liked on the international stage, and people really saw him make a fool of himself. Got snubbed at the airport by the leader of India. So I really think people were just seeing that his image is very fake.
Well, he was also found violating the ethic commissioner's rather low standard of ethics, and he just shrugged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a certain arrogance to him where he's very, he thinks everyone else has to follow the rules, but when he doesn't or gets in trouble, he just blows it off and thinks it's no big deal. And he's very condescending, if you watch him Question Period. The way he answers questions, he often lectures people on how the system works, even when he's not following the system himself. And I think people are just tired of it. During the campaign, they were very effective at hiding his arrogance, I think, in a lot of ways. He made a few mistakes, but the campaign was pretty strategically run, and they kept the focus on Harper. And I think now that there's no one to campaign against, and people are seeing Trudeau for what he really is, people are not liking what they see too much.
Well, there were all those allegations made about Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Do you think he held on to Bill Morneau too long and maybe should have switched finance ministers?
Yeah, I think it's all, a lot of things are accumulating. It's often, for a government, it's not just one thing that puts them in a bad situation, but it starts to accumulate. You know, people won't turn against the government because of one issue or two or three even, but when it starts to just kind of build up in people's minds that, okay, we're seeing constant problems with the Trudeau government, a constant attitude of arrogance and dishonesty, and then he makes a fool of himself in India, and then it all comes together, and I think people just start to say, this is not what we thought we were getting.
We look at his trip to China as well, where it looked like he was almost kicked out of the country.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to actually be able to achieve any good results on his foreign trips, which is interesting because the Liberals, when they were elected, they said, oh, Canada's back. You know, we're going to be important on the world stage. We're going to be making deals with people, and it hasn't turned out that way at all.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, do you feel Canada's announced plan to go to Africa on one of the most dangerous peacekeeping missions on the planet could end up being a disaster for the Canadian Armed Forces?
Yeah, I think it's a terrible idea. There's a good article by John Ivison in the National Post, and he says he had, I think in 2016, he'd spoken to Romeo Dallaire, who said he wouldn't touch Mali with a 10-foot pole. So if Romeo Dallaire, who probably has about the best experience of anybody seeing what can go wrong on a UN mission in a war-torn African country, if he's saying it's a terrible idea, the government should be listening to that. There's no strategic benefit to Canada from Mali. We don't have a big trading relationship with them. There's no real sort of alliance we have with them, so there's no real logical reason why Canada should be involved there at all, especially when you consider how underfunded our armed forces are. I mean, we're going to be sending people into, it's not even really a peacekeeping mission. There's not peace to keep there. It's a civil war. So you're sending people in to keep peace in an ongoing civil war. Doesn't really work out too well. And we have a very underfunded military. So I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Will they get the support they need? And also, did they ask for Canadian help? All we're sending is helicopters.
They're going to be sending, I think, 200 troops or 200 military personnel as well. So it's not only helicopters that are going. The UN has been asking Canada for a while. I think Germany had made a request as part of the UN. So there was a request for help. In terms of getting what they need, I mean, the helicopters are not top of the line. I'm sure a lot of the equipment they have is not top of the line. So, I mean, we have great military personnel, but the government doesn't give them the best of the best, which is always dangerous. And this is really, I think, Trudeau's attempt to win the United Nations Security Council seat. So he's really putting our troops in danger just so he can feed his ego.
Are not former armed forces personnel still asking for decent pensions?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an ongoing issue, and the Trudeau Liberals promised to do something about it. Then they spent 2 years coming up with their plan, and it failed miserably. It wasn't well received. In many cases, veterans are going to receive less than they would have been getting under the previous system. So, yeah, that just add that to the list of broken promises.
Well, to get to the maximum benefit, something like only 12% of wounded veterans would qualify for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that?
I mean, I'm looking at what people have been saying about it, and a lot of the organizations are not pleased.
why do you think he's done a public relations disaster there where they promised to do better than the Conservatives, who really did let a lot of veterans down? Why can't our armed forces personnel just get what our parents got when they were in the armed forces?
I'm not sure. It seems like it's something, and it's beyond just the Trudeau government. It's happened in other governments as well, but it's like the one place where the government tries to save money is when it comes to veterans. I mean, they're fine blowing billions on everything else and running massive deficits. But when it comes to helping veterans, all of a sudden they become really stingy with the money. And I think it's part of a bigger trend in our society where we've kind of, lost any sense that we need to be strong militarily. We need to have strong defenses. The world's still not a nice place. You can't just assume the best and hope everything goes well. And, there's kind of a naive and weak attitude with a lot of our leaders, and that feeds into everything. It feeds into the way our veterans are treated, and it feeds into the way our military is severely underfunded.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the pink CYDVF, and on Frankfurt C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, you may not be aware of the fact that in Vancouver, which has the highest gasoline prices in Canada, right now, it's really struggling because the local refinery is down for maintenance, and the two American refineries that are the nearest are also down, so we're paying $1.56 a liter for gasoline. April 1st, the provincial NDP government will allow a planned carbon tax increase go through, which will add about another 7 cents a liter to gas. Are Canadians in general unfavor or not in favor of higher or more carbon taxes?
Yeah, I think what's been seen is that, the government will say, people support it because the way they sell it is, this is revenue neutral, you're not going to pay anything more for anything, and it helps the environment. So, everyone can support that idea in theory, but it never turns out that way. It just turns into a cash grab, and I think people are seeing that. It's not revenue neutral. It makes everything more expensive, makes gas more expensive, clothes, transportation, everything, because it filters out throughout the entire economy. It doesn't do anything for the environment. Additionally, Canada, even if we shut down our entire economy tomorrow, it wouldn't make much of a difference in world emissions. China's building tons of new coal plants, and so is India, so two of the biggest polluters. So we can't really do much there anyway. And then it's obviously not revenue neutral because the money goes to a provincial government, which then decides what they want to do with it, and they never give it all back in taxes. So I think the idea of helping the environment and doing something that's revenue neutral sounds very nice, but when people see the reality of it, it's not popular. And if you look at what's happening, Alberta and Ontario are poised right now. If you look at the polls, two leaders there who are saying they're going to get rid of the carbon tax. So you're going to have much of the country not having a carbon tax and not in support of it. And that's interesting because Catherine McKenna's now warning that their climate plan could be, might not survive too long, which would be a good thing for Canada if their climate plan went down because it's a terrible plan. It's really just a cash grab. So yeah, I think it's the more people see of the carbon tax in action, the less they like it.
Well, it would be okay if there were alternative sources of transportation, but for most of Canada, transit is not an option. If once you get out of the big cities or even just the urban cores of those big cities, transit isn't available, or you're looking at a 2.5 hour trip to get to your job and then 2.5 hours back home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really absurd because Canada is a cold country. It's relatively sparsely populated over a massive amount of territory, and we have immense amounts of natural resources, energy resources. So you would think Canada should be a country that both needs to use a lot of energy and should have very cheap energy. We have a massive amount of oil reserves and a relatively small population. And it's ironic with BC having and Vancouver paying such high prices for gas. They're right next door to a province which has massive amounts of oil. So obviously there's it's stupidity with it. I mean, imagine looking at other countries, and if they were given the resources we had, would they squander them the way we do? Would they be doing the same things we do? I don't think so. And it's really quite embarrassing.
Well, you have the dispute between Alberta and BC over the pipeline. We also have the governor of Washington State saying, I'm against the pipeline as well. But isn't he being a little two-faced here, because they ship oil out of Seattle, and if Vancouver doesn't do it, they'll ship it out of Seattle, and they'll get the port royalties for all the ships coming in there.
Yeah, I mean, we really shouldn't be caring what the governor of an American state is saying about that. It's not really their business. And, the U.S. has been massively ramping up their oil production. So, yeah, we don't... I mean, it's in the interest of the states for us to produce less, I suppose, in the long run, because then they will make more money. But, we shouldn't be listening to other countries on that.
Aren't a lot of the environmental groups who are against the BC pipeline funded by Americans or by oil states in the Middle East?
Yeah, a lot of the funding comes from foreign countries, so, which, I mean, it makes logical sense. If you're Saudi Arabia or, another big oil producing country, you want to remove your competitors and be able to drive the price up. So if you want to get Canada out of the way, then you want to build up the movement of people here in this country that are opposed to the oil industry and try to shut down projects and reduce investment. And that's what they're doing. So, I mean, you can't really blame those countries for playing the game, but our own leaders need to be smarter, and I think we need to personally, I think we should ban any organization from receiving foreign funding in that way. If someone is advocating against, or an organization is advocating against the Canadian energy industry, and they're receiving foreign money, then that should be illegal. I mean, it's just crazy that we're letting other countries trying to poison the minds of our people to be against their own industry.
What about the new leader of the NDP? What kind of a job is he doing?
Not too good. That same poll that showed Trudeau's disapproval rating going up to 56%. They also polled attitudes of the other leaders. And Jagmeet Singh's not doing too well. Only 7% of Canadians see him as the best pick for Prime Minister. And when you consider the NDP normally hovers around 20% or so in the polls, that means just over a third of their own voters think he's the best choice. So they've got some serious issues.
What do you think are some of the biggest problems facing Jagmeet Singh?
Well, it's the perception of his, I think a fair perception, his ties to the Khalistani movement, the movement for independent Sikh state in India. It's not really that popular in India itself. I mean, the support for that has plummeted in India among the Sikh community. There's pretty strong unity within the country. But for some reason it's really taken off in Canada, and he's been to events where speakers have supported the use of violence. One event he attended, one of the other speakers had said political violence is an acceptable thing to try to gain independence. He didn't push back on that. He didn't use his opportunity to say he disagrees with violence. It took him a long time to condemn the mastermind of the Air India bombing. He was first interviewed by Terry Milewski right after he became party leader, refused to condemn it. He's condemned the bombing, but refused to condemn the mastermind of it, and then even said, we still need to look into it to see who did it, even though numerous investigations have reached the same conclusion. And only after his whole recent controversy, where he started getting a lot of criticism, then he said, I totally accept the findings on who the mastermind is, and I agree with that, so he's backtracking. So it's very interesting that someone who's, linked to people who've been advocating political violence, his whole campaign slogan is love and courage, right? So very interesting. He's talking about love and courage, but it seems like he's been, around a lot of people who don't seem to have the same attitude. So you wonder if that's a bit of a way for him to distract from things.
He also doesn't seem to be all that reporter friendly. He doesn't like to answer questions.
No, and his supporters, I've noticed a disturbing trend where whenever he gets asked a tough question, they just say it's racist. So, I mean, that's interesting. If you're going to be in politics, you're going to get asked tough questions. And it doesn't matter what your race is. I mean, everyone gets asked. And every political leader has their kind of certain area where they have trouble. Andrew Scheer got asked a lot of questions about the rebel and right-wing media. I'm sure he didn't like those, but that's part of the game. Jagmeet Singh, he has shown connections to people who've advocated for political violence. So it doesn't mean he's advocated for it, but it's still fair to ask him what he believes and why he's been at events where people have made those statements. And so if he and his people are just going to, his people in the NDP, the NDP leaders and their members are just going to call that racist, I don't think that's going to work out too well for him.
Well, my goodness, any question, I guess, if you're going to use that as a defense, could be seen as offensive. But as a journalist, that's your job to ask questions, and sometimes if they seem uncomfortable or not politically correct, the matter is it's how you answer that question, not what the question is.
Mm-hmm. And it's always telling when someone, in this case, Jagmeet Singh, only kind of gives the logical answer after massive amounts of controversy and criticism. It tells you they don't really believe it, but they're just saying what they think they need to say to make the controversy, hopefully in their case, go away. And I think it's gonna be an issue for him. I mean, Canada, we shouldn't have leaders in this country with divided loyalties. Jagmeet Singh should be interested in leading Canada, not Khalistan. And I think the perception that he is more interested in really trying to break up another country I think that's, people don't like that. I mean, in one of his speeches, he referred to India when speaking of, the Khalistani movement. He said, India is our country where we live, even though he was born in Canada. So that's kind of an odd mindset. I mean, India is not his country, or shouldn't be, because he was born in Canada. Someone that immigrated from India, and they still considered India and Canada their country. Someone understandable, because there's always a connection to the place of your birth. But Jagmeet Singh was born in Canada, so for him to be saying India is our country where we live, that's kind of strange.
Anything else you want to tell us about today, Spencer?
No, I think we'll just accept it's going to be an interesting week with gun legislation. I think that's going to be brought forward. There's a lot of concern the Liberals are going to be bringing back the gun registry, just calling it something different and doing it kind of piecemeal and by stealth. So I think that's going to be quite controversial. So I'm sure that'll be something for us to discuss next time. Thanks a lot for being on the show. Have a good day. My guest has been investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at spencerfernando.com. Thanks for listening to us. If you have any questions for our guests or the show, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.